Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
What is awesome health? It's actually an acronym that stands for air, water, exercise, sunshine, optimizers, mental beliefs and attitudes, and education. These are the pillars of peak health, and my team and I have created a free 12-week course that you can use to transform. Each day, you'll get a written and video lesson delivered to your inbox. Everything is covered from the foundations of digestion to advanced alternative therapies few people know about. And again, it's 100% free. Just go to bioptimizers.com. That's bioptimizers.com. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from the Awesome Health Podcast, and I'm joined today by none other than Kris Gethin, CEO of Kaged Muscle Supplements. He's the author of several best-selling books, including Bollywood by Design. I want to talk about that in a minute. And the Transformer Ironman, host of Knowledge and Mileage podcast. We connected on that just a few weeks ago. And as well, he's one of the world's most well-known and well-renowned trainers and transformational specialists. And to give you a little background on that, I just got back from India, and we connected after, and I'd seen this picture of this guy associated with Bollywood stars. And Bollywood, just so you know, makes 3 times the amount of movies that Hollywood does. And there's this whole culture that has emerged in the last maybe 5 years, 6 years, something like that, where Bollywood stars want to get in great shape. That's a new trend, and it's out of Mumbai. And I saw these pictures, and then we connected on the podcast, and I'm like, did I see your pictures? And it turns out Kris has gyms there. He's well known in the Bollywood scene. He's done so much in the industry. And of course, you used to work with bodybuilding.com way back in the day. I got started in my online career by submitting articles to bodybuilding.com, and it was really neat to connect it over that. Kris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that introduction. And just like you said, we connected on the podcast, on my podcast a couple of weeks ago. So I was absolutely honored to have you as a guest. And now I'm absolutely honored to be a guest on yours. So thank you very much for having me.
So I'm curious as to what was the trajectory of your journey to not only just, well, maybe you can start where you got started, how you get going, and then how did that lead into, of course, you've built an incredible physique, but then you took that and transformed it into a whole business and a whole career, and have now have gotten world renowned for what you've done, supplement companies, I mean, the whole 9 yards. You've really done it from soup to nuts. How did you get started? What attracted you into the industry or getting started in fitness and that sort of thing?
I found that fitness and studying health and fitness was the only thing that I could retain. I flunked at school. I hated school, didn't like it at all. When people said to me, school years are your best years, I couldn't relate to that whatsoever. I'd always been a relative introvert, didn't do well around other people, never participated in team sports. And so I didn't like being around other school kids or teachers. I liked to be at home on the farm, riding my motorbike, just being outside, seeking adventure. And during the time at school, I raced motocross for about 13, 14 years, like almost every weekend. I would be racing somewhere around the country or around Europe. And it wasn't until my early 20s, when I'd suffered that many injuries, I spent more time in hospital than I did on the racetrack, that I started seeing specialists, chiropractors, osteopaths, and massage. And when I went to physio and actually you started doing resistance training, I got alleviated of a lot of the pain that I was feeling from these injuries, specifically my spine. I have a major curvature of my spine. So I thought, I actually like how I feel now. I'm not dealing with a depression. I feel like I've got more energy. I feel more focused. Let me continue down this. This is a little bit more addicting to me. And then I decided to get out of the engineering course that I was doing at college, because I wasn't retaining much there anyway, and study international health and sports therapy. So I started going to college for everything from personal training, from coaching to nutrition to aromatherapy oils, absolutely everything. And I absolutely loved it. And 3 years later, I became qualified and knew that that certification was my ticket out of mid-Wales, where there was a lot of partying, there's a lot of drugs. It was like a drug capital of Wales. And I was surrounded by the wrong people. So I left there to work on cruise liners as a personal trainer and massage therapist, and which then took me to Australia. I had a gym there, which I started writing. I taught myself writing and photography, started submitting my content to magazines because I wanted to reach to more people. And I decided I'd risk everything, sell the gym, move to the US, Venice, California, in the hope that I'd get a job over here. So I started personal training in Gold's Gym whilst getting my content out there. And within 6 months, I got myself a writers and photographers contract with Weeder Publications, which then led to me publishing my own magazine for a couple of years, which led to me then being noticed by Ryan DeLuca, the founder of bodybuilding.com, to move me up to Boise, Idaho to start as the editor-in-chief of bodybuilding.com, which led to a few other things from there. And I was competing during this time as well. So 1999 was my very first bodybuilding show. I went into a non-tested show because I had no idea there was such a thing as drug-free or tested or whatever. But I managed to get third. I was by far the smallest person there, but I came in very lean. But then I found out about natural bodybuilding, and I continued bodybuilding in Australia, in the US up until 2009. And my last show, I won here it was the Idaho state titles. And I found that I didn't get any more satisfaction coming first or second. So I figured, I just enjoy training. I just love training. It's therapeutic. So I gave up competing and putting out more content for people to learn from that I wished that people had put out for me back in the day, but there was no internet. So, that's what I try to do to this day.
It's a fantastic and fascinating kind of trajectory. And some of the things I like is your willingness to just pick up and move and do whatever it is and follow your heart. I think a lot of people struggle with that, but it just seems to come natural to you. Would you say there's any aspects that allow you to make those kind of what some people would say radical changes in your life in the pursuit of your career?
It's quite odd because to me, I don't know, maybe it's part of my DNA. I don't see it as being radical. I don't see it as being too much of a risk. I just think, okay, if nothing was to come of it, well, what am I going to lose? I'm just going to go back to the life that I had prior, which is okay. But if I don't go, I'll never know. And, I'm quoting the term of Henry Rollins when I say knowledge without mileage is. So I like to put in the mileage in order to gather the knowledge.
It's great. So what are some of the things that you've noticed in your career in the industry? Because you've kind of been right in the epicenter of a couple of movements. Number one, you've owned and operated your own gym. You've overcome, physical challenges yourself that kind of got you into the industry. Then you became a trainer basically in the epicenter of the bodybuilding world, the Gold's Gym, Venice, California. If you haven't been there, folks, you got to go. It's a superhero factory. And then you're part of the movement that really, I think, brought bodybuilding to the next level of mainstream, which is bodybuilding.com. Probably been maybe the most influential web series in that industry, and also a career in Weeder, who was really the Weeders essentially created the whole bodybuilding scene that allowed the Arnold Schwarzeneggers to come to fruition, and really are the founding fathers of the fitness exercise movement. So there's the extreme level of bodybuilding, but that's trickled down to gyms that we see today. In Arnold's time, there was about 300 bodybuilders in the world, maybe all training in Venice. And now there's millions, and then the translation of that. So what would you say that journey, or what have you learned in that process? You talked about maybe myths or things that people get caught into. What are some of the things that people maybe misidentify with the bodybuilding world?
I think Instagram and social networking and stuff like that has given this instant gratification attitude out there that people seem to expect, that everybody wants results now. If I was to put out a video trainer that says, hey, you can get it in shape in 4 weeks over one that says 12 weeks, everyone's going to go towards the 4 weeks. But if they don't get their results in 4 weeks, then it's very easy for those people to kind of shrug their shoulders and give up. I don't think people are willing to make the sacrifices as much as they used to. You know, people would look to sacrifice before success, where people just want to bypass the sacrifice and go for the success a little bit more now. And, you know, we do live in a world that is a lot more convenient and comforting. And so, you know, people fall into that rut, and they expect that from all walks of life. And I see that in business. I see that from people's physicality. I'm generalizing, obviously. You know, I don't want to sound like I'm that old guy. Well, back in my day, it was. But I definitely witnessed that. You know, I see it all the time. I hope that it's not something that's a virus that's going to escalate and keep catching. I don't really want to be a part of it. So all I can do is kind of educate people and tell people, well, you know, there's some more disciplinary actions that you should possibly place upon yourself in order to get the most out of yourself. So if that means taking a cold shower every morning because you're doing something that you don't really want to do, but you get used to it, then that's only going to have an advantage. It's just a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain. Obviously, with the online platforms, everybody's an expert. Everybody's got an opinion. And there's a lot of people out there based on the amount of following that they have. People will judge and see if that person, you know, is that expert, that quote unquote trainer is going to be the best person to get a program from, you know. So, you know, I know somebody, I'm not going to name that person, but he's got over 1 million followers, and I've been on tour with this person. And not on tour, I've been at expos with this person, and I've just seen his PayPal just go ding, 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 constantly selling programs, you know, selling an ungodly amount. This person's not a qualified trainer. I'm not saying that they should all be qualified by qualified trainers, but I don't think that, I think people quickly fall into the groove of looking at someone's physique and the amount of following that they have to accompany that, and then all of a sudden assume that they're an expert. Whereas, you know, back in our day, it was the bodybuilder that was more the expert, or the guru, or the personal trainer. You go to these expos today, a lot of these legendary bodybuilders, you know, like Frank Zane, there's hardly any, you know, people that recognize that person or is even lining up to go to their booth. But you'll see somebody who's got a couple of million followers and they've got a massive line. And, you know, unfortunately, it's just the day and age that we're in. But, you know, those are probably the major changes that I've seen.
You bring up a good point. And in your opinion, what do you think, for someone that's listening to this, like what do you think are the key components that would qualify someone as an expert, that someone could kind of trust, you know, hey, look, I'm committed to getting started on a program. I know I need some expertise. What do you feel are the earmarks of an expert that can legitimately help somebody achieve their goals?
Well, there can be a couple of components here. Number one, let's see if they do have any qualifications, but that isn't always necessary. I know some really, really good coaches out there who coach, you know, Olympian athletes, but they don't have qualifications, but they're very good with their instinctive adaptations to that person's physique and personality. If there's no certifications involved, you know, look at what they've done with other clients, have a look at other testimonials, speak to some of those clients, see what they've done with them. Find out if, you know, if that is something. And thirdly, you know, this isn't always essential, but if they're missing out on the first two components, or even if they've got those first two components, do they practice what they preach? You know, there's, you know, if they look good, they're their own shop window front, yes, that's one thing. Do they have their certifications? Yes, that's another. Have they shown, you know, do they have a track record with other clients? Whether that's specifically towards cycling, bodybuilding, strongman, or whatever, then those components are definitely going to put some feathers in your hat, I think.
What are this good advice? What do you think has changed, I would say, in a positive way or a negative way with the digital world today? In other words, back in, to date ourselves, back in the day, we used to kind of read these magazines, and we'd look and we'd see these little muscle go round at Venice Beach, or we'd have a little 300-word article that we would try to grab a kernel of truth. Oftentimes it was just pure marketing. What would you say has changed now in the positioning of expertise and the availability of information? And there's positives and negatives to it. I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Sure. Well, it was funny when you mentioned that. It just instantly took me back to a time when it was the year 2001, and I was in Australia, and I was at the IFBB championships in Australia, and Tony Doherty getting a phone call saying who had just won the Mr. Olympia to let us know, because it was daytime the following day there. So it's like, wow, okay, Ronnie's won it, and now we can watch it live stream. It's completely different. I used to love going to my local news agents to find out if my new Flex magazine had come in, and I'd probably gone in a week before that it's set to come in, just to see 3 months later. Okay, Dorian Yates won, and it's 3 months later, but we just didn't know. We had no way of knowing. But today, I think one of the advantages is that we're able to interact. I'm having this conversation with you. I'm able to pick your brain. I love that. I'm able to provide information now to people who no longer had this information. Like you said, it could have been several months, and you're not always going to be able to interact with that bodybuilder or expert unless they lived in your local town, or you happen to go to an expo where you could get a couple of minutes with them at max. But now, if you see somebody that you relate to, someone that you look up to, there's a possibility that you can interact with that person and learn from them, and get online training from them, or free training. There's a lot of free information out there, which is absolutely phenomenal. If that dishwasher behind me breaks down, my girlfriend can go online and learn how to fix it. Yeah, we've got YouTube now for all of these things. But back then we did not have that. I think that is a fantastic resource and advantage. But I'd say the disadvantage is that we don't hold that much value to it as we once did. People will go on and they'll troll a lot of the athletes and bodybuilders, and it could be a 14-year-old, 15-year-old kid, hiding behind his keyboard, thinking he has the right to do that. So I think there's a lot of authenticity has kind of gone down the drain with it, unfortunately.
So let's say you have somebody who's, let's say, really serious about getting their level of fitness up, or they have a physical goal that they want to achieve. What would your suggestion for them moving forward in kind of this digital age? Like, how would you say, hey, look, here's what you need to do. Step 1, step 2, step 3.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'd say, first of all, everybody's going to be an online expert. Everybody's going to have advice for you. And, some people quite often will come to me and ask me for advice, however they've got a coach. And I'll say, look, you've got to listen to your coach. That's the person that you're interacting with. It's very easy for you to be going down towards this road, towards maybe your competition, and then, as let's say if you're doing a bodybuilding competition, you're getting low on your fats, your brain isn't thinking as it should, you're starting to doubt yourself, then all of a sudden you're reaching out, you're learning from every expert, and then when you apply all of it, there's so many variables that are gonna go wrong, which are likely to go wrong. Lessen those variables and follow through, and that's the only way that you're truly got to find out and learn from that. The other thing is with this, unfortunately, like I just come from the gym, and I see so many people just on this, the amount of time that they could spend focusing for that next set, that next rep, or whatever, that next exercise, whatever it is, instead of texting. I'm sure they're going to be able to provide more intensity within themselves within that workout, because unfortunately, there's just so much distraction. I understand that's where a lot of us make our money. That's where business is made. But we don't have to be taking selfies every few minutes. But, if a client comes to me specifically, I'm saying, look, you're going to have to prepare for, there's going to be a lot of unwanted distractions out there. And there's going to be a lot of things that go wrong. You could be traveling, there's going to be a delay. You could be stuck in traffic and you're not going to have your food with you. There could be, you could be invited to a social gathering and you're going to be tempted to go off your diet. You have to be prepared for these things so it doesn't hit you as a surprise, because I think that's the biggest thing. People drop a weight on their foot and now they're not training for the next week. Well, you should have kind of been mentally prepared for that. You know, I did an Ironman last week and I knew, okay, I could have my face kicked in the swim. I could have a puncture on the, on the bike. You know, anything could go wrong on a run. So I'm prepared for that. I knew that. So when I was on a run, yeah, I had an issue with my knee, but I was prepared for it. So I stopped at every aid station and iced it for 1 minute before moving to the next aid station. And I, successfully finished. However, it's only because I was prepared that anything can go wrong.
You bring up some great points. And I think that's where coaching really comes in, because, I was listening to Jocko Willink the other day, and it was interesting. He said, the military who plans and preps probably more than any other operation out there. And he says, you come in, no matter how well you can rehearse the plan, then all these contingency happen. So then it's like you have to prepare to adapt to the plan. And I think that's where real coaching can help. And make the difference. I know in my own career, I'll use an example, and I'll parlay this into what you just said. I remember when I was competing for the 97 provincial championships, I had lost the year before, and I had focused for 50 weeks to get ready for that show. And it's 2 weeks out from the show, and the head judge, who was a 3-time national champion himself and a former Mr. Universe, he placed second in Mr. Universe. He says, hey, let's take a look at how you're looking. So I said, great. So, I went through my poses and my routine. And then he said, okay, here's what you need to do over the next 2 weeks to really come in dry and hard. So he gave me some tips that he thought. Now, the interesting thing was, it was counter to everything that I was currently doing.
Oh, no.
Right? And so I wrestled with this challenge. And keep in mind, I've put everything I've got, 10 years of training, a year's preparation. And here's the guy that I know and respect says, you know what, you need to do this, this, and this. And I wrestled with it for about 48 hours. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to continue doing what I'm going to do. Because changing now, I really don't know if my program has worked or not worked. I went to the show. I won, barely. By one vote, I won the overall championship. It was my first big victory, and it was fantastic and all that stuff. But I remember walking out of that show and said, I will never have that experience again. And I surrendered my ego, hired my coach, who was Scott Abel at the time. And literally over the next year, I made the most amount of progress I did in my entire life. And every show I went in, I didn't have any questions. I had someone to go through and had someone to give me that advice, in those challenges. Let's talk about that when you're working with clients. What are the common challenges that you've seen over and over and over? And what are some of the things, of course, when you're dealing with these high profile people who have so many distractions? How do you get them on that focus?
I'll normally lock them in a room first and just scare the bejesus out of them.
That's cool.
I look intimidating, but I'm far from it. But it's to work. But I do, whenever I have a consultation with somebody, I am very straight up front. I really don't care. I prefer to waste someone else's time than waste mine. I'm only there for results, because selfishly, I know it's great marketing for me. If I get an amazing transformation out of a client, then I know that I could get 5 other clients from it, or could lead to something else. And that's how my gyms started in India. It's because I had an amazing transformation with a Bollywood client, and it got all over the major newspapers and TV shows. So I was able to get a lot more from that. So it's very important to me, but obviously it's even more important for the clients as far as I'm concerned. And the biggest problem with a high-profile actor, weirdly enough, is their schedule. A lot of people think they have a cushy sort of lifestyle, which they don't. It's very difficult. And the client that I was working with during the time that I was there, he didn't have a weekend off for 7 months. And the biggest challenge is that instead of being selfish. They are very selfless. They put everybody else before them, which is very kind-hearted. It's very nice of them. However, that's not going to get them to where they want to go. They can't be a people pleaser and please themselves, especially when you're working with a client to get a transformation in such a short time. Like, I work on very short transformations. There's a reason behind it. Like, I may work with a client for 3 years. It could be longer, but I'll break it up into usually 8 or 12 week windows, because I want to create a sense of urgency. I don't want them to even think about cheating once. I'll give every one of my clients a very small pocketbook, so they have no excuse why they didn't carry it with them. And if I have to highlight one thing in that book, that puts them back a day. So they know that. So 24/7, they're basically thinking about not going off track, not hitting a snooze button, not cheating, because it's a constant reminder. If they missed their meal by 30 minutes, highlight. If they didn't have carbohydrates in that meal and they should have, highlight. If they didn't do the amount of cardio, highlight, et cetera, et cetera. And, it's quite often I'll be texting them. I'll send them information, maybe resources to certain studies to give them more information, because the more they understand, the more knowledge that they have, the more likely they are to follow through it, because you have to convince them this is the right way, this is the right thing to do. Because everybody has doubts. Everybody's thinking of the excuse. Everybody's questioning you. That's absolutely fine. But you need to provide those answers before they even ask for them.
I love how you break down into those small, condensed time frames, I think, to create that urgency. Because I think a lot of people kind of get these kind of airy-fairy goals off in space, but they tend to lose focus. I mean, we set 90-day goals in our business, and we have weekly check-ins just in our business. It makes sense in today's world to have that from a physical side. I mean, that's where I think great coaching comes in. What would you say are the biggest obstacles that you find clients, come up with? Like, what's the most common excuses, or what are the major adjustments that you feel people need to make if they really want to make the changes to have that physique they desired and to maintain that?
Yeah. I can't walk from last week's leg day. That's usually the biggest excuse. I can't walk anywhere. And that's completely normal, that you're not going to be able to walk for a while. The biggest thing is obviously nutrition. Mm-hmm. Nutrition is the biggest factor, because we have that 23 hours, 23 hours, imagine that long in the gym, that 1 hour in the gym where there's no distraction, there's no marketing, there's no fast food joints, there's no aroma for a Subway or whatever it is. Whereas as soon as we get thrown into the real world, we are absolutely covered with marketing material for fast foods, to become a little bit more sedentary, to have something delivered to a house. And then if you go into the home environment and you've got a family, if you've got kids or you've got visitors, that's going to be a distraction. Because like I said, generally, I don't go towards like a ketogenic diet, even though I do love the ketogenic diet for anti-inflammatory purposes. I don't generally go towards that with clients. If they're doing a very short, like they've got to get ready for a movie role, they've got to get ready for a shoot or whatever. So I'll generally pull their fats quite low during that time, which does lead to a lot of cravings, unfortunately. But I just found the majority of clients, not everybody, will get in shape very quick as soon as I bring their fats down to a certain degree. However, I know that's going to lead to a lot of cravings. It's not something that's going to be healthy long term. That's why I'll only do it for a short period. But the biggest part is making sure that they have plenty of meals within them. They're not generally fasting, not my clientele. I have some clientele that I do have on fasting plans. So they're having plenty of meals, plenty of fluids, plenty of distraction. I will try to put a transformation within their program when they have their busiest time of the year, if it's available. Because I find if people have too much time on their hands, they're thinking of food too much, and those cravings start to come in. So I try to fill them up with as much fluid as possible. There could be some nice teas. I'll put in a lot of spices, because the spices satiate them as well. And that's pretty much the top end.
The Bioptimizer mission is to help more of the world fix their digestion at a core level. The truth is, your digestion is only as good as your enzyme levels. Imagine trying to build a house with a tree. It's impossible. You need to chop the tree down into small pieces. Similarly, in order for your food to be used by your body, it must be broken down into a bioavailable form. And that's what enzymes do, converting protein into amino acids, fats into specific fatty acids, and carbohydrates into usable energy units. We start out with an abundance of enzymes, and that's why kids can digest just about anything really quickly. The thing is cooking food kills enzymes as they cannot survive at temperatures above 118 degrees. So years of this ends up depleting our bodies and leads to weak digestion. Taking digestive enzymes like masszymes, which has an incredibly high level of protease for digesting protein, as well as other critical enzymes like lipase, amylase, and others is a total game changer. Suddenly you strengthen your digestion, eliminate gas and bloating, boost metabolism, and multiply your energy. Most importantly, you fix your digestion at a core level. To get started with Masszymes and to save 10% on your first order, go to masszymes.com. That's masszymes.com and use the code MASS10, MASS10.
You mentioned a couple things I think is really interesting because there's a lot of, as I've been in the industry a long time, and you see these trends come in, and right now we're in the middle of what I would say a ketogenic trend. You also mentioned that you find, the old school kind of lower body fat, like lower the fat intake and, high carb, carbs and protein kind of meals, which is kind of like the old traditional bodybuilding methodologies.
For sure.
What would you say are the advantages and disadvantages of each one of those diets? I'd like you to flesh that out a little bit more, because I think so many people today are just in one camp or the other, and that's all they want to hear about, but they don't realize that you can utilize different diets at different times for different reasons with the same person. Well, how is that philosophy developed or cultivated for you? Because I think this is a really important point.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for me, I do like the basics. It's always worked. So if it's not broke, I'm going to tweak it. I'm not going to completely try to fix it. So yeah, I will generally go for the 5 or 6 meals. Carbohydrate source, a lot of fibrous carbs. The diet today is definitely lacking in fiber, so I usually supplement with fiber as well. And so if I'm trying to get somebody in shape during that time, that's the kind of diet protocol I'm going to follow. However, I know that isn't something that you can sustain for a long time. You have to look at the health of people's metabolism, thyroid, brain health, and anti-inflammatory purposes, because, the mTOR pathway, IGF-1 pathway can get a lot of overuse with that meal frequency and the carbohydrates. So I would generally follow that protocol for the majority of people. But then I will go into like a cyclic keto diet where, they would have majority of fats throughout the day, very low carbohydrates or no carbohydrates, maybe some fiber. But in the evening, maybe they'd have, some antioxidants, some fruits, some berries, and, maybe some complex carbohydrates, but then get back into ketosis the following day, and then slowly put them into a little bit more of a ketogenic diet just to remove a lot of the inflammatory responses that they've built up on the higher carb, lower fat diet.
It's great. It's great insights for people. I think we'll probably see more and more people evolve into those cyclic patterns because, I've always said that no one diet is the be all and end all for anybody. There is advantages and disadvantages to each one. And it's nice to see that you've kind of provided a holistic presentation of the information. And I'm assuming that's based on your own experience and working with clients.
It's both based on my own experience, but that's from what I've learned from other people, because I'd never really got into the keto diet really. But then as I started learning a little bit more of our inflammatory responses, and as for lack of a better word, biohacking had become more of a thing, I started researching that a lot more and thought, well, okay, we're not just trying to get these people in shape. We're also trying to provide them with a healthy health span and a lifestyle. And, how can we integrate both? Because bodybuilding isn't the healthiest or transformations onto the most healthiest of lifestyles. There's a lot of inflammatory response that happens here, and luckily we got so many tests that we can use now, from like Wellness FX, or we got Quest or LabCore, or we can even have our telomeres tested now. So it's good to have all these biomarkers that we can utilize to help understand the body. If the body's working well, then it's going to function well, it's going to transform well. We just got to make sure that the engine is firing, just not in our younger years, but in our older years as well.
That's fantastic. Now, you've got a lot of series out there: the Hardcore Trainer, the Muscle Building Trainer, 4 Weeks to Shred Trainer. You've had over 150 million views on your information, which is incredible. Kudos to you on that. Who are your video series for, and what is the message behind them? You can go into each one, or anything new that you've brought. I'd like to bring that to people's attention.
Yeah, for sure. So when I was at bodybuilding.com, I was the only person there competing. There was only like 30 of us in the office. So when I got booted in front of the camera because I was the competitor, we figured, okay, what are most people coming to the site for? They want transformations. They want to lose body fat. They want to build muscle. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go through my transformation, and we're going to have a video crew film it every single day for 12 weeks. So that's what we did, and it proved to be very, very popular. So it isn't just, because people look at me, I've got a bit of a mohawk sometimes, I've got tattoos everywhere, and think, wow, that's way too hardcore for me. But these programs are for male, female, young, old, intermediate, beginner, advanced, everybody. You just follow it with the intensity that's most suitable to you. But, I have programs specifically for, like I just did some seminars at military bases and GNC stores just last week. And I had people some females that are in their 50s coming up that have lost like 150 pounds on the programs. But then I'm, speaking to military personnel that have followed my program that found it was great for them to, do their obstacle racing, or actually going into combat. There's a lot of different aspects there. But I just selfishly like to go through a program and then selflessly publish it for people to follow. So, I did my Ironman last year, so I did that, and it got that completely documented. Did an ultra marathon after that, and got that documented. So there's something for everybody. You don't have to do an ultra marathon. You could do a 5K with that, or you could do a sprint triathlon, or you could just get ready for a photo shoot. It's a bit of everything for everybody. I know it's a general answer, but it is a general outcome.
That's fantastic information. By the way, we'll put links to all of these sites so people can check this out on the interview. I want to switch gears a little bit because you mentioned a couple times now about you're doing Ironmans now, which is almost total. It's radically different than, say, bodybuilding. How did that transmutation, or how did you switch into the whole Ironman world, and what things did you have to make adjustments from the bodybuilding world to a more endurance based activity?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I've always done cardio every day, sometimes twice a day. It's quite common, and I honestly feel that was the way that I was able to put on muscle every year naturally for so many years.
What's the mechanism do you feel that allowed you to do that, the cardio aspect?
It just allows me to recover. It gives me the justification to eat so much more food. If I'm able to, as it's not what you just take in, it's what you absorb. But I was able to synthesize and facilitate that food to be used as fuel for recovery, for muscle gain, because I'd always annihilate myself in the gym. And I found just removing the lactic acid from my body and improving my blood flow as a transporter of these nutrients to these localized areas that I've just broken down just allowed me to recover so much more. I used to train 3 days a week. Then I increased it to 4, then 5. And it'd be nothing for me to train 6 days a week and recover very, very well. And I honestly feel that's through the blood flow and transportation of the nutrients. And
what types of cardio were you doing? And for duration and intensity? Yeah,
if I was losing body fat, it would be steady state. And it would start off at, say, 20 minutes each session per day. I'd do 2 sessions. And then towards the end of the diet, I'm doing like 55 minutes twice a day.
Mm-hmm.
But if I was actually trying to build muscle, I would do high intensity interval training, and that would only be for about 15, 20 minutes. Now, the reasoning why I do that is because my cortisol is just so high in a calorie deficit and training that way. I didn't want to spike my cortisol anymore with high intensity interval training, and I could possibly get injured. But in a calorie surplus, when I'm putting on weight, I want to ensure that my cardiovascular function is still high, which I know as I'm putting on weight, especially I do have asthma as well. It can affect my breathing. And I train with a lot of volume in the gym. So I wanted to ensure that I'm still able to train with a lot of volume and a lot of intensity and recover between the sets and, have the fitness as I'm putting on the weight through my muscle building phase. And in a calorie surplus, I'm not too concerned about my cortisol as I would in a deficit.
Right on. And so then the transition that you've kind of moved into this triathlete world, how did that happen? And what's the differences?
Yeah, so again, it comes through a lot of online trolls, people telling me that I'm just doing way too much volume. I shouldn't be doing so much cardio. You're going to lose muscle. And a lot of people wouldn't do cardio because they felt that they was going to lose muscle. However, I thought it was very important, not only from a recovery point of view, but for heart health. It's not our delts or our pecs that's going to get us to 80 years old without any issues. It's going to be our heart. So that's very important to me. So I really wanted to get this message across. And I thought, I will do something completely extreme, off the chart. I'll go to the labs, ensure that I have all the tests to show that I will not lose any muscle during this 6-month period as I prepare to get ready for an Ironman. So I documented that. I was going into darkened waters because I'd never done anything before. And I was just hoping that I was able to retain all my muscle. And I was able to put on 3 pounds of muscle during that process of preparing for the Ironman, just to show people, look, you don't need to go to the extremes of getting ready for an Ironman. However, you can do cardio a couple of times a day and you're not going to lose any muscle. In fact, I suggest it. So I was able to get that message across. And in the process, I absolutely love this. It's humbling that so many people come up to me now at events or expos or send me direct messages and they show me pictures of their Ironman medal or they participated in a half marathon or something like that. And they're bodybuilders. And they've actually crossed into that world, or they came from that world originally and got into bodybuilding and thought that they had to stop that. And that's very fulfilling for me.
It's really cool, and it blows up a lot of myths I think are out there. So kudos to you to be able to, as I say, put your money where your mouth is, and actually demonstrating people and documenting that to people. Because again, there were these kind of carryovers of belief systems that were maybe not tested or tried. And the theories sound good, but application is very different than theory. And
exactly. Yeah. Knowledge without mileage. Again, you have to put in the mileage to get an understanding, to put in the knowledge. It's like this year I decided, what? I'm going to see how much muscle I can lose and see how that affects me, how that changes me. And again, people just think I'm crazy doing that, but hey, I'm going to put the muscle back on next year. That's absolutely fine. Don't worry. Don't unfollow me. But I just want to be able to give my feedback for you guys. This requires a lot more discipline than actually putting on muscle, because I've done that for 20 years. I've been trying to burn body fat. To actually lose muscle, that's tough. But just going back to how you said how my training changed as I was preparing for the Ironmans, I would actually use my weight training as a pre-fatigue method before going out and doing my cardio sessions, because I didn't want to train like a traditional triathlete. I didn't have the time, for one. And I did think that I could possibly injure myself and I possibly would lose muscle. So I would, for instance, have a crazy, insane leg workout that would be documented, and then go out for my run or, hill sprints on the bike.
Wow. Impressive.
Yeah. So instead of going out for my 3-hour bike ride, as you generally would, maybe, I'd, only do an hour bike ride because my legs were pre-fatigued. Or if I'd hit triceps and lats, and then I'd go out for my swim with paddles, to cause even more resistance. Those were the sort of things. But being a bodybuilder is a lot more upper body weight. So we become very unstable, especially from our feet and our ankles. So I did ensure that, I have got very skinny ankles anyway, and I've torn the tendons in them, I've broken one. So I would do squats on like a Bosu ball, or I'd be on a balance ball at some point. And I'd do a lot of unilateral exercises like pistol squats, knowing that a lot of the work that I'd be doing out on the track would be unilateral. So I needed to strengthen a lot of the stability muscles, which were very, very weak. And being heavier, and I've got flat feet as well, I would, the connective tissue becomes very, very tight between our metatarsals, the bones in the feet. So I'd roll out on a tennis ball, or then, try to work my way up to a golf ball. So there's a little bit more spring in the foot, so it wouldn't be such of a shock pattern driving through the knees and hips and the back. So there's various challenges, but it's fascinating to find out how that works. And when you actually go through that transformation yourself, I'll tell you what, you feel so much better because you're not just working your primary movers.
It's a fascinating thing. And I think what's interesting is you kind of glossed over this, but, you had a lot of physical challenges, damage to the organs, the tendons and ligaments, and injuries from your kind of wild past, asthma, and you were a bodybuilder, but you didn't let any of that stop you from successfully competing in triathletes. Any tips on, say, overcoming limitations? Because if anybody would have an excuse not to do that, that would be you, but you didn't use that. Is there any tricks that you use mentally to allow yourself to kind of make these accomplishments and not accept limitations?
It's practicing being comfortable, staying uncomfortable, I think, because it definitely comes down to the mental aspect. Like, I'm no tough guy, but I try to create some sort of discipline in my life every now and again to ensure that it's okay to be uncomfortable. So like I said, very often, today I'll have my infrared sauna and then I'll have a cold shower, as I always do, because I want to be uncomfortable. Whenever I go back to Wales at Christmas time, myself and my father will hike the highest peak in Wales, being Snowdon, when it's snowing and cold and sleet and bad weather, to get uncomfortable, to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So I think when you prepare yourself for those eventualities, mentally you condition your resolve, you're able to navigate your way through these little issues. I'm not saying you should train through injuries by any means, but there's always, the majority of the time, there's a way of navigating around it. When I had my shoulder surgery like 6 months ago, my first ever surgery, that was a long time coming. The next day I was on my stationary bike and I was training my right side. There's no reason why you cannot do that. You just have to be methodical about it and say, okay, instead of looking at what I can't do, let's look at what I can do.
That's a great message. And something I think needs to be brought out there today, because I think that the definition of a champion, in my opinion, and then I'm going to borrow this from Teddy Atlas, the world famous boxing trainer, and he said, every person who becomes a champion, and a champion is not to me necessarily someone who wins a trophy or a title, but when you come up against resistance, how do you handle that resistance, whether it's in the gym, whether it's in your relationship, whether it's in your life? Then you're going to find out what you're really made of. And a champion is someone who gets it done despite the challenges that they're faced. And of course, he's dealing at the very highest levels of physical combat sports where the adversity is extreme. But I think we can take that and apply it in our own lives, as you have. And I think it's a great message for people to understand. Hey, you want to look this way, you want to be this way, or you want to achieve something that's rare, you're going to meet some obstacles.
Yeah.
How you face those obstacles, are you going to find an excuse to check out, or are you going to find a way? And it's obvious that you've done that. And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip. Turn cultured foods into superfoods. Raw fermented foods like sauerkraut and low sugar, live yogurt can be good for you, but rarely have enough of the right probiotic strains for therapeutic benefit. So here's a way that you can turn them into superfoods. What I do is I get some raw sauerkraut or a healthy yogurt. Ideally, it's grass-fed or coconut-based. And you can empty 3 caps of P3OM into a container and mix it up thoroughly. Leave it at room temperature for a couple of hours before putting it back into the fridge. And what's going to happen is these probiotic levels will be multiplied. In fact, it doubles every 20 minutes. And then what you're going to get is you're going to have a food with strong proteolytic activity. To learn more about P3OM and why its patented strains make it the strongest probiotic available, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.